The revelation hit me like a tidal wave, drowning every ounce of trust, respect, and love I had built over a decade. The text came through late at night, just as I was lying in bed, mindlessly scrolling through photos on my phone. It was from one of my friends, though she hadn't messaged me in months, one of those casual, catch-up friends who send memes more often than heartfelt words. But this time her message was no meme. "Hey Anna, I don't know how to say this, but have you seen the way he looks at her? It's almost too much." The rest of her words didn't make it past my numb fingers, scrolling down her short but damning message again and again. The he was, of course, Thomas, my husband. I felt a pang in my stomach reading her. But my brain refused to supply an answer. I called her immediately, and she picked up within seconds, her voice low and tentative. "I didn't want to bring it up," she started, her tone thick with hesitation. "But my daughter goes to the same music school. I've seen them together, Anna. Well, it's different. Too close for a teacher and a student." "Who?" I whispered, a pit forming in my stomach. "Her name's Cassie. I think she's just 19, she said, barely able to get the words out. And then the pit in my stomach turned into a void. A vortex pulling me down, down, down. Thomas was my anchor, my steadfast partner. The man who built a life with me over quiet Sunday breakfasts and deep conversations about family. He was a music teacher, passionate, dedicated, and sincere. He'd tell stories of his students with a light in his eyes that had always made me proud. But now I realized I had been blind to the way that light might have shifted. I tried to reason with myself. It was late. Maybe my mind was conjuring shadows. I clutched my phone, debating whether to confront Thomas immediately or let it lie. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Surely it had to be. He was my husband. He wouldn't throw away everything we had for a student. The following evening, I decided I couldn't bear the silence. He was sitting at the dining table, scribbling notes into his lesson planner. I mustered every ounce of courage, walked over and asked, "Thomas, is there something going on with one of your students?" The pause that followed was unbearable. He didn't look up, didn't even flinch. He just froze, pen hovering over the paper. His lips parted slightly as if caught in a lie even before he could speak. What are you talking about, Anna?" His voice was strained, unnatural, and he still refused to look at me. The silence was a scream in itself. I knew right then. I saw the guilt carved into the lines of his face, the way his shoulders slumped as if the truth was a weight he couldn't bear. "Cassie," I managed to whisper, the name almost burning my tongue. "I know something's been happening with her." For a moment I thought he might deny it. He opened his mouth, his eyes flicking up to meet mine for the first time, and I saw the conflict raging inside him. But then he let out a shaky breath and ran a hand through his hair, a movement I recognized as his way of bracing himself. "Anna, it wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice a mix of shame and defeat. My world shattered right then, splintering into fragments of everything I thought I knew. He started talking, explaining, as if there was anything he could say that would make this hurt less. She was talented, he said, dedicated to her music, and they had spent hours together after class discussing pieces, practicing. One late night after an extra session, one lingering look, one shared laugh that lingered too long. And just like that, something had started. Something had grown until it was bigger than both of them. The details poured out like poison, each one more painful than the last. She had confided in him, relied on him, and somehow, he'd convinced himself he was giving her something she needed. The way he described her, her youth, her vulnerability, made my stomach twist with revulsion. How could he betray everything we had for a fantasy? "I thought I could keep it under control," he muttered, as if he were talking about a wild animal, a beast that had somehow overpowered him. "You thought you could keep it under control?" I repeated, my voice brittle on the edge of shattering. "You thought you could control cheating on me?" He didn't answer, just looked down at his hands, ashamed but not enough. Never enough. I couldn't look at him anymore. I felt sick, disgusted, and so profoundly hurt that I thought my chest might cave in from the weight of it. I got up and walked out, not even sure where I was going. I ended up in our bedroom, where the smell of his cologne hung in the air, clinging to the pillows, the bedspread, all the small memories that had once comforted me and now only filled me with loathing. Days passed in a blur of disbelief and pain. I had once thought the biggest trials in life were external forces: illness, financial hardship, the struggles of family life. But nothing had prepared me for the betrayal that could come from within, from the person who was supposed to be my partner. He tried to apologize, saying it had been a mistake, a lapse in judgment, a moment of weakness. He even had the gall to say it was over, that he'd ended it. But I knew that ending it wasn't enough. The damage was done, the trust irrevocably shattered. I couldn't just erase the image of him with her, a girl young enough to be his daughter, a girl who saw him as someone he could never be for me again. I thought about leaving him. Some days I could pack my bags and walk out without a second thought. Other days the idea of starting over, of untying our lives so completely, felt impossible. But staying meant living with a man who had betrayed me so deeply that every glance, every word, every touch felt like a lie. In the end, I knew I had to make a choice for my own sanity, my own self-worth. I couldn't let his actions define me, couldn't let the poison of his betrayal seep further into my soul. I took one last look at him, the man I had once loved so deeply, and I realized he wasn't the person I had believed him to be. Maybe he never had been. And so, with my heart broken but my spirit unyielding, I walked away, leaving behind the ghost of the life we'd once shared. Leaving that house felt like walking away from everything familiar. Every hope, every plan, every small comfort that had once defined my world. It was more than leaving a marriage, it was abandoning a version of myself. A woman who had once believed so fiercely in love, trust, and partnership. My hands were shaking as I closed the door behind me, and I didn't look back. I had to believe that there was strength somewhere in this pain. Something that would eventually make me feel whole again. But in that moment, I felt like a stranger in my own skin. I rented a small, unfurnished apartment across town, far enough to escape the memories that lurked around every corner, but close enough to remind me, in moments of weakness, that he was still out there. I didn't bring much with me. Just a suitcase of clothes and a few essentials. The rest I left behind. The apartment had a strange smell, like stale coffee and old books, and the beige walls seemed to close in on me as I took my first look around. I collapsed on the small mattress I had bought, exhausted but too numb to sleep. Every night for the first few weeks I felt a crushing emptiness. I was haunted by thoughts of Thomas and Cassie together, the way he had looked at her, the words he had used to describe their connection. I would lie awake replaying our last few months together, searching for signs I had missed. The pain was a constant ache, dull but insistent, and it seemed to settle into every bone in my body. Some days I felt almost hollow, as if I were just an echo of who I'd been. I went to work, kept up the appearance of normalcy, but inside I felt raw and exposed. People would ask about Thomas, and each time, I would just offer a tight-lipped smile and say he was busy with work. I didn't want their pity, didn't want to become a cautionary tale whispered about in hushed tones in the break room. One evening, as I was sitting on the cold, hard floor of my apartment with an untouched cup of tea in my hands, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a friend, Sarah, one of the few people I trusted enough to share my ordeal with. She had been a constant support since the day I walked out on Thomas, always checking in, always there with a kind word or a reminder that I deserved better. "Let's go out tonight," she texted. "You need a change of scene." I was hesitant. The thought of going anywhere, of pretending to enjoy myself, felt exhausting. But Sarah was persistent, and in the end I agreed. Maybe I did need a change, a reminder that there was life beyond the pain. We went to a small cozy bar on the edge of town. The dim lighting and soft jazz in the background created an atmosphere that felt warm and safe, a sharp contrast to the cold emptiness I had been living with. Sarah ordered drinks and talked about everything but my marriage, effortlessly filling the silence with stories about work, her family, anything to keep my mind from drifting back to Thomas. For a few brief moments I felt almost normal. At one point, Sarah excused herself to the restroom, and I found myself alone at the bar, absently swirling the ice in my glass. A man approached, a stranger with kind eyes and a warm smile. He introduced himself as David, a teacher at a local high school, and we struck up a casual conversation. He was funny, gentle in the way he listened, never probing too deeply, sensing that I was a bit guarded. His presence felt like a balm, a reminder that not every man was like Thomas, that kindness and respect still existed in the world. As the evening went on, I found myself laughing, the sound strange and unfamiliar but wonderful. David didn't ask about my past, didn't pry. He was content to talk about mundane things, about movies, books, music. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't weighed down by the pain, by the constant reminder of what had been taken from me. The evening ended with a simple goodbye. No promises, no exchange of phone numbers. But as I walked back to my apartment, I felt a strange sense of hope, like a tiny flicker of light in the darkness. It was the first time I had felt anything other than pain since I left Thomas, and that small spark of joy felt precious. The days turned into weeks, and gradually I began to rebuild. I poured myself into new routines, filled my time with books, music, and long walks. I started attending yoga classes, letting the physical challenge distract me from the emotional one. I even took up painting, something I hadn't done since college. Slowly, I was reclaiming pieces of myself that I had forgotten, pieces that had been buried under the weight of my marriage and the betrayal that had torn it apart. One afternoon, I got a call from Thomas. I stared at the screen, the familiar name flashing at me, stirring a mixture of anger and sadness. After a moment's hesitation, I answered, bracing myself for whatever he had to say. "Anna, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice sounding strained and unfamiliar. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I know I hurt you in ways I can't even imagine. I don't expect forgiveness, but I just wanted to say it. To say that I'm sorry." His words washed over me, stirring emotions I had tried so hard to bury. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to throw every ounce of pain back in his face. But another part of me, a quieter, stronger part, felt an unexpected sense of peace. "I appreciate that, Thomas," I said, my voice steady. "But your apology doesn't change what happened. It doesn't take away the pain or the trust you broke. I've spent too much time drowning in this hurt, and I need to move on. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. But I can't be part of your life anymore." There was silence on the other end, and I could almost hear him absorbing my words. Eventually, he murmured a quiet goodbye, and the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the silence filling the room like a quiet comfort. I realized that I didn't need closure from him, didn't need his apology to heal. I had already started healing on my own, finding strength in the small things, in the quiet moments that had nothing to do with him. Over the following months, my life slowly transformed. I made new friends, pursued new hobbies, even went on a few dates, though I was careful, protective of the heart that had been so deeply wounded. I learned to trust myself again, to see myself as whole and worthy, regardless of the pain I had endured. Looking back, I realized that Thomas's betrayal had been a catalyst, a painful but necessary rupture that forced me to confront parts of myself I had neglected. I had learned to love myself again, to find joy in the small moments, to embrace the unknown with an open heart. And so I moved forward, not as the broken woman he had left behind, but as someone stronger, someone who had reclaimed her own life, her own happiness. The scars would always be there, faint reminders of a love that had once been beautiful, but they no longer defined me. I was free, unburdened by the weight of betrayal, and ready to face whatever came next with a heart that had learned to heal. Time moved forward, carrying me with it in a rhythm that was sometimes comforting, sometimes jarring. In the quiet moments, I could feel my past life receding, like waves pulling away from the shore, leaving fragments behind. I began to embrace the unfamiliar feeling of solitude. For years, I had been defined by my role as Thomas's wife, my identity wrapped tightly around our shared life. But now, without that anchor, I was free to explore parts of myself I hadn't known in years. I started setting small goals. It began simply. A commitment to read one new book a week, try a new recipe, or spend an hour each day learning the basics of painting again. But with each passing day, my goals grew. I enrolled in an art class at a local community center, a place filled with people of all ages who were chasing creativity in their own unique ways. It was liberating to be around strangers who knew nothing of my past, who saw me only as Anna, another woman with a paintbrush and a canvas, trying to express something within. My first few paintings were shaky, awkward combinations of colors and shapes that felt more like attempts at therapy than actual art. But slowly something clicked. I began to pour my feelings into my work, my anger, my hurt, my confusion. It was as though I had found a new language, one that didn't need words to convey the complexity of what I had been through. and the more I painted, the lighter I felt. Art became my refuge, a way to process my emotions and make sense of the tangled mess that had been my life. One evening, after a particularly intense session at the art studio, the instructor, a kind older woman named Margot, approached me. She had a keen eye and had likely picked up on the rawness in my work. "Anna, have you ever thought about showcasing your pieces?" she asked, her voice warm and encouraging. "We have a small exhibition coming up, and I think your work would resonate with a lot of people." The idea caught me off guard. Showcase my art? It felt strange, exposing something so personal to the public. But at the same time, the suggestion sparked something inside me. Maybe I thought it was time to stop hiding behind my pain, to let it out in the open, to own it. Over the next few weeks, I poured my heart into creating pieces for the exhibition. My paintings became a visual diary, each one a chapter of the journey I had taken. There was one that showed a house in flames, a depiction of the way my marriage had disintegrated. Another of a woman standing alone by the sea, surrounded by swirling stormy clouds, a testament to the loneliness I had felt after leaving Thomas. On the night of the exhibition, I felt a mix of pride and vulnerability. The gallery was small but packed with people, many of them strangers who walked through the space, observing each piece in quiet contemplation. Sarah was there, her presence a steady anchor, and she stayed close, giving me the strength I needed to stand by my work, to let it be seen. As I watched people moving from painting to painting, I realized that, in some way, I was finally letting go. By sharing my story through art, I was releasing it, allowing it to exist outside of myself. And in doing so, I felt a strange peace. Near the end of the night, I noticed a familiar face in the crowd. David, the man I had met briefly at the bar months ago, was standing in front of one of my pieces, a painting of two hands, reaching for each other but not quite touching. His gaze was intense, his eyes tracing the lines with quiet reverence. I felt a rush of emotions, a flutter of nerves as I approached him. "David," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned, his expression warm and open. "Anna, I didn't know you were an artist." "I didn't either," I replied, letting out a small laugh. "It's new." He smiled, a gentle understanding in his eyes. "Well, you have a talent. There's so much feeling in your work. It's beautiful." We spent the rest of the evening talking, moving from one painting to another, discussing art, life, and everything in between. There was something about David that made me feel at ease, a sense of calm that was refreshing after the turmoil I had endured. He didn't press about my past or try to pry into the details of my pain. He simply listened, offering companionship without any expectations. In the weeks that followed, David and I grew closer. Our conversations were filled with laughter and ease, yet there was a depth to them, a mutual understanding that didn't require words. He became a friend, a steady presence that I came to cherish. He was different from anyone I had known, kind, empathetic, with a quiet strength that drew me in. He never tried to replace the pieces of me that were still broken, but he respected the space I needed to heal. As our friendship deepened, I found myself questioning whether I was ready for something more. The scars from my marriage were still there, faint but lingering reminders of the betrayal I had endured. I was afraid to trust again, to open myself up to someone else and risk being hurt. But David was patient, never pushing, never expecting. He allowed me to set the pace, to move forward at my own comfort level. One evening, as we were sitting on a bench by the river, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he turned to me, his gaze soft but steady. "Anna," he said, his voice filled with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "I know you've been through a lot, and I don't want to rush anything, but I care about you more than I thought I would." The vulnerability in his words touched something deep within me. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my own hesitation, my fear. But then I thought about everything I had been through, the pain I had endured, the journey I had taken to find myself again. I realized that I was stronger now, that I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, and that maybe, just maybe, I was ready to take a chance on happiness. "I care about you too, David," I said, my voice barely a whisper. And in that moment, as we sat together beneath the fading light, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet reassurance that maybe, after everything, I was finally ready to let someone in again. Our relationship blossomed slowly, built on trust, mutual respect, and an understanding that neither of us was perfect. He knew about my past, about the betrayal that had nearly broken me. But he didn't judge or try to fix me. Instead, he accepted me as I was, scars and all. And in that acceptance, I found a love that was gentle, healing, and real. Months turned into a year, and I began to see a future with David. A life filled with the small joys that had once seemed so out of reach. I continued to paint, to create, to explore this new life that I had carved out for myself. The pain of my past hadn't disappeared, but it had faded, becoming a part of me without defining me. One afternoon, as I was tidying up the apartment, I found an old photo album tucked away in a drawer. It was filled with memories of Thomas, of the life we had once shared. I flipped through the pages slowly, feeling a strange sense of detachment. The woman in those photos felt like a stranger, a version of myself who had loved deeply, who had trusted implicitly, and who had been hurt in ways she couldn't have imagined. But she had survived. She had found a way to heal, to rebuild, to create a new life filled with love and purpose. As I closed the album and placed it back in the drawer, I felt a sense of closure, a quiet acceptance of the journey that had brought me here. I had found my way back to myself, back to a life that was full and rich and real. And as I looked out the window, watching the sun cast a warm glow over the city, I knew that I was finally truly free. Life, I realized, moves in cycles, a rhythm of beginnings and endings that sometimes feels more like waves than a straight line. My journey had carried me through so much loss, betrayal, and healing. Yet here I was, in a new chapter of my life, finally at peace with the parts of myself that had once felt broken. David had become a part of my everyday world, a steady presence who gave me the space to be both vulnerable and strong. We shared a life that was filled with simple joys, small routines, and a gentle love that I'd come to treasure. But it wasn't all easy. There were still days when the scars of my past surfaced, days when memories of Thomas and the pain he caused would slip into my mind uninvited. David understood. He never pushed me to get over it, never made me feel like I had to rush my healing to suit anyone but myself. If I felt haunted by doubts or flashes of old pain, he would listen, hold me, and reassure me with a quiet presence that was more healing than any words. One autumn afternoon, about a year and a half into our relationship, David suggested we go on a short weekend trip to a small town by the coast. The idea felt perfect, a way to escape from our routines and just focus on each other. We rented a small, cozy cabin near the water, nestled in a cluster of trees that swayed in the ocean breeze. The air was crisp and the leaves were a fiery mix of reds, oranges, and yellows, casting a warm glow over everything. The cabin was charming, with a small stone fireplace and wide windows that looked out onto the waves. We spent our days exploring the quiet beaches, collecting seashells and breathing in the salty air. At night, we'd sit by the fire, talking about everything and nothing, feeling more connected than ever. For the first time, I felt a freedom that went beyond just escaping my past. I felt as though I was starting to create new, beautiful memories, ones that didn't hold the shadows of betrayal or pain. One evening, as we sat on the sand watching the sun dip below the horizon, David took my hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles over my skin. He turned to me, his eyes soft and serious, a look that I had come to recognize as his way of holding something close to his heart. "Anna," he began, his voice low and tender, "I want to build a future with you, a real full life. And I know that's not something we can rush into. I just want you to know that when you're ready, when we're both ready, I'd like to spend that life with you." My heart swelled with emotions that I hadn't expected. Part of me wanted to say yes, to throw myself into this love, to promise him everything I had. But another part of me, the part that had been wounded so deeply before, felt a surge of fear, a reminder of the risks that come with trusting, with opening myself fully. "I want that too, David," I said, my voice shaky but honest. "But I need time. I want to give you everything, but I'm still learning how to give that to myself first." He nodded, squeezing my hand. "I understand. I'm here no matter how long it takes." And that was David, patient, loving, and unwaveringly supportive. He didn't need declarations or promises. He just wanted to be with me, to walk beside me on this path as I figured out my own heart. And that, more than anything, made me realize how deeply I loved him. The months that followed were filled with quiet, meaningful moments that strengthened our bond. We grew together side by side, each of us bringing our own unique experiences, joys, and pains to the relationship. I found myself laughing more, letting go of the hesitations that had once held me back. David had a way of making life feel lighter, of reminding me of the beauty in each day, in each small moment. One weekend, we decided to host a small dinner for a few friends in our apartment. It was nothing fancy, just a casual evening with good food, laughter, and the warmth of people who had become our chosen family. As I watched David moving around the kitchen, preparing dishes with the same care he put into everything, I felt a wave of contentment wash over me. This was what I had always wanted. A life that was simple yet meaningful, filled with the people who truly mattered. During dinner, Sarah, who had been one of my greatest supports since my separation from Thomas, leaned over and whispered, "I'm so happy for you, Anna. You deserve this, every bit of it." I squeezed her hand, a silent thank you for everything she had done to help me reach this point. I knew that without her encouragement, without her constant belief in me, I might never have had the strength to rebuild my life and open myself to love again. After everyone left, David and I cleaned up together, moving through the small rituals of tidying up and putting things away. There was something comforting about these shared tasks, these small everyday actions that built a life together one moment at a time. As the weeks turned into months, David and I fell into a rhythm that felt natural, like two pieces of a puzzle that fit seamlessly. We supported each other's dreams, encouraged each other's passions. I continued painting, and with David's gentle encouragement, I even started showcasing my art at local galleries. He pursued his own love of teaching, always sharing stories about his students with a light in his eyes that made me love him even more. And then one winter evening, as snow fell softly outside our apartment, David took my hand and looked at me with an intensity that made my heart race. "Anna, I know we've been through so much together, and I know you've taken this journey to rebuild and reclaim your life. But I want you to know, I want to be with you truly fully for as long as I can. Will you marry me?" The words hung in the air, and I felt a rush of emotions, a mixture of joy, fear, and an overwhelming sense of love. I realized that despite everything I had been through, despite the pain and the broken trust, I was ready. I was ready to believe in love again, to take a chance on a life filled with both the highs and lows that came with it. "Yes," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "Yes, David. I want that too." He pulled me into his arms, and in that embrace, I felt a profound sense of peace. This wasn't the perfect fairy tale love I had once dreamed of. It was better. It was real, resilient, built on honesty and trust, on shared moments of vulnerability and growth. Our wedding was a small, intimate gathering, filled with only the closest of friends and family. It was simple, elegant, a reflection of the life we had built together. As we exchanged vows, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. Not just for David, but for the entire journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain, the healing, the rebuilding, it had all led me here, to a love that was true and lasting. In the years that followed, David and I built a life filled with love, laughter, and the kind of peace that comes from knowing you are with someone who sees you for who you are and loves you, scars and all. We traveled, explored new passions, and supported each other through every twist and turn that life brought our way. And though I would occasionally think back to that chapter of my life with Thomas, it was no longer with pain or regret. Instead, it was a distant memory, a reminder of a path I had once walked but had long since left behind. It was a part of my story, yes, but it was no longer the defining one. Now, as I sit here writing this with David beside me, our lives intertwined in a way that feels as natural as breathing, I feel an overwhelming sense of peace. I know that love is not always easy, not always perfect, but when it's real, when it's built on respect, trust, and understanding, it's worth every moment. And as I look at him now, I know that, through everything, I have finally found my home. The years together with David passed, each one adding depth and richness to our lives. We settled into the kind of quiet, fulfilling routine that I had once thought was only possible in stories. There was comfort in our morning rituals. David would brew his coffee, a strong, dark roast, while I lingered over tea, watching him as he read the news or planned his lessons for the day. Small moments like these, once so ordinary, became cherished, grounding us both in the simplicity of shared companionship. Our home, though modest, began to fill with memories and pieces of our journey together. I added my artwork to the walls, each painting a snapshot of where I'd been or where I hoped to go. David added bookshelves, each filled with texts he'd collected over the years, covering everything from poetry to history to philosophy. On weekends, we'd visit local galleries or go on long hikes, enjoying the beauty of each season as it unfolded. Life had settled into a rhythm that was peaceful, steady, and deeply fulfilling. One of our favorite pastimes became creating little projects together, small ways to improve our home or add touches that were uniquely ours. One spring, we decided to build a garden in the backyard. Neither of us had much experience with gardening, but we threw ourselves into it, planting everything from tomatoes to wildflowers. The garden became a place where we could work side by side, digging our hands into the earth, watching as each seed grew into something vibrant and alive. It was a metaphor, I realized, for our lives. Each small act of care adding to something greater, each seed of love growing into a deeper, stronger bond. As time passed, we found ourselves surrounded by a community of friends who had become family. Sarah was still a constant in my life, her friendship a steady reminder of the resilience I had discovered within myself. She and her partner would come over for dinners, and we'd spend hours laughing, reminiscing, and sharing stories from our past and dreams for the future. Our lives intertwined in ways I'd never anticipated, each of us supporting the other through the inevitable challenges and joys that life brought. One evening, after one of these gatherings, David and I sat alone on the back porch, looking out at our now blooming garden under the soft glow of the patio lights. He reached over, taking my hand in his, and for a moment we simply sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the evening. A soft breeze rustling through the leaves, the distant hum of crickets. "Anna," he said quietly, his voice breaking the stillness, "do you ever think about the future, what it might look like?" I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I think about it all the time," I admitted. "But for the first time, I'm not afraid of what might come. With you, I feel like I can face anything." He smiled, pulling me close. In his embrace, I felt the same warmth and safety I'd come to rely on. The sense that I had found not only a partner but a true friend, someone who saw every part of me and accepted it all without question. As the years continued, David and I faced our share of challenges. There were health scares, the passing of loved ones, moments of uncertainty about work and life choices. But through it all, we leaned on each other, supporting one another with the kind of unwavering love that had grown quietly but powerfully over time. Every obstacle we faced together only seemed to deepen our connection, reminding me that this was what I had always been searching for. Not a perfect fairy tale love, but a resilient, enduring one. When David's father passed away, I saw a side of him that I had rarely glimpsed. He was vulnerable, struggling to reconcile the loss with his own sense of identity. His father had been his role model, a man who had taught him the importance of integrity, kindness, and hard work. In those difficult months, I found myself becoming the support he needed, the steady presence that he had so often been for me. I held him through sleepless nights, listened as he shared memories, and reminded him of the strength he had within. It was a time of sorrow, yes, but also of growth. A reminder that love isn't just about the happy moments. It's about being there for each other through the darkest days. We took a trip to the mountains that winter, needing a break from the heaviness of loss and the busyness of everyday life. The cabin we rented was simple, nestled in a quiet, snow-covered valley. We spent our days hiking, breathing in the crisp, cold air, and our evenings by the fire, wrapped in blankets, sipping hot cocoa. On our last night, as we stood outside under a sky filled with stars, David turned to me, his expression serious yet soft. "Anna, you're everything I ever wanted," he said, his voice filled with an emotion that brought tears to my eyes. "Being with you has taught me so much about love, about life. I can't imagine doing any of this without you." I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body against the cold night air. "I feel the same way," I whispered. "You've shown me what love is supposed to be, patient, kind, and true." That moment under the stars stayed with me, a quiet yet powerful reminder of the journey we had taken together, the love we had built. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. A quiet, steadfast commitment to each other. A promise that we would face whatever came next together. As we grew older, we found new ways to stay connected, to keep our relationship vibrant and alive. We started traveling more, exploring places we had always dreamed of visiting. Each trip brought its own memories, its own moments of wonder and discovery. We wandered through ancient ruins, explored bustling cities, and hiked along quiet trails, each experience a new adventure that deepened our bond. One day, after a trip to Italy, I decided to start writing down our stories, capturing the moments that had defined our lives together. It was a project born out of love, a way to preserve the memories we had created, to look back on the life we had built with gratitude. I wrote about our first meeting, the early days of our relationship, the challenges we had faced and overcome. As I wrote, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had led me here, for the love that had grown quietly but steadily, like the roots of a tree. Years later, as we sat together in the twilight of our lives, I looked at David, his hair now touched with gray, his face lined with the gentle marks of time. There was a peace between us, an understanding that went beyond words. We had built a life filled with love, joy, and resilience, a life that had been shaped by both the beauty and the pain we had experienced together. As we watched the sun set on yet another day, I felt a sense of contentment that I had never thought possible. Life had brought me through so many twists and turns, so much loss and heartache, but it had also brought me here, to this moment, to a love that had lasted, endured, and deepened with each passing year. In the quiet, I took David's hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine, and I knew with a certainty that went beyond words, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. As David and I entered the later stages of our lives, I found myself cherishing every single moment we spent together with an intensity one hadn't known was possible. Time seemed to pass differently, quicker somehow, each year filled with milestones that, in their simplicity, held profound meaning. The rhythm of our lives had become one of deep comfort, of knowing glances, and of shared silences that spoke more than words ever could. Even our small routines, preparing dinner together, taking evening walks through the neighborhood, sharing stories over morning coffee, had become sacred, a testament to the life we had built side by side. There was a morning just after David had retired from teaching, when we both sat in the kitchen watching the sun rise. I remember feeling an overwhelming sense of calm as we discussed our dreams for this new chapter. There was something enchanting about the prospect of time without constraints, of days that could be filled with whatever we chose. We made a list of all the things we wanted to do, places we wanted to visit, projects we had put off. It was a simple list, no grand gestures, no extravagant adventures, but rather small, meaningful things. Learning to cook a new cuisine, volunteering in the community, even fostering animals. One dream that had stayed with us over the years was the idea of opening a small art studio and gallery. My artwork had evolved over the years from an outlet for healing to a true passion, and David, ever my biggest supporter, encouraged me to share my pieces with others. He suggested that the gallery could be a place not just for my art, but for local artists, a space where creativity could thrive and bring people together. We found a small storefront in town, an old building with brick walls and tall windows that let in the perfect amount of natural light. It was modest, but it was ours. Renovating the space was a project that brought us closer than ever. David took charge of the practical tasks, sanding, painting, installing shelves, while I focused on curating the artwork, creating pieces that captured the emotions and experiences that had shaped me. The gallery quickly became a reflection of our journey together, a celebration of life's fragility and beauty. I displayed pieces that I had painted during the most difficult times in my life, alongside newer works that embodied the peace and joy I had found with David. The grand opening was a quiet but meaningful event, attended by friends, family, and local artists who had become dear to us. As I walked through the gallery that evening, watching people interact with the artwork, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was more than just a gallery. It was a culmination of years of love, resilience, and growth. I could see the reflection of our lives in every corner, every brushstroke, every carefully chosen piece that adorned the walls. This place, much like our life together, had been built with love, patience, and a steadfast belief in the beauty of second chances. Over time, the gallery grew into something more than we had imagined. It became a community space, a place where people gathered for art classes, poetry readings, and small exhibitions. Local artists found a home there, and David, with his natural gift for teaching, often led workshops and events, sharing his love of literature and music with others. It was a gift to watch him inspire people, to see his gentle nature and unwavering passion spark joy in those around him. We were no longer just creating art. We were building connections, bridging lives, and in a sense, giving back the love we had found in each other. One winter, when a heavy snowstorm blanketed our town, the gallery transformed into a refuge for the community. People stopped by to warm up, share stories, and find comfort in the cozy atmosphere we had created. It was a moment that reminded me of why we had opened the space in the first place, to bring people together, to create a haven where anyone could feel at home. There was a particular day that still lingers in my memory, a day when David and I sat in the gallery, surrounded by the paintings and sketches that told the story of our lives. I looked around and saw not just art but memories, paintings from the early days of our relationship, sketches I had done during our travels, portraits of friends who had become like family. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, a quiet awe at the life we had built, the love that had carried us through everything. David took my hand and we sat there in silence, simply absorbing the moment, feeling the weight and beauty of it all. Years later, when age had slowed us down and our hair had turned completely silver, we continued to find joy in the small, everyday moments. We took shorter walks, spent more time in the garden, and spent countless hours sitting on our porch, watching the world go by. There was something magical about these quiet moments, about the way time seemed to stretch and contract, allowing us to savor each breath, each heartbeat, each glance that passed between us. We had become each other's home, a constant presence that grounded us, comforted us, and reminded us that love at its core is simply being there for each other. As the years continued to pass, we began to talk openly about the inevitability of life's ending. It was a topic we approached with a mixture of sadness and acceptance, understanding that our time together was finite, but that the love we had shared was eternal. We made a promise to one another that no matter what, we would carry each other's love with us, that our spirits would be forever intertwined. David often told me that meeting me had been the defining moment of his life, that I had given him more joy and peace than he had ever thought possible. And I felt the same. He had given me a second chance at love, a love that was richer, truer, and more resilient than I had ever known. In those final years, we grew even closer, if that was possible. Every touch, every shared smile, every whispered, "I love you," held a weight, a significance that I couldn't fully put into words. We had created a lifetime of memories together, each one a thread in the tapestry of our lives, each one a testament to the beauty of second chances and the power of a love that endures. Eventually, the day came when David's health began to falter. He faced it with the same quiet strength he had shown throughout his life, never once complaining, always focusing on the moments of joy we could still share. I became his caretaker, a role I embraced wholeheartedly, knowing that every day with him was a precious gift. As I sat by his side holding his hand, I felt the depth of our connection in a way I hadn't known was possible. I was there for him just as he had been there for me, through every storm, every challenge, every joy. On a peaceful autumn morning, with the soft light streaming through the window, David took his final breath. He passed with a gentle smile, his hand resting in mine, his spirit calm and at peace. I held him close, feeling the weight of his absence, the quiet stillness that filled the room. My heart ached with a pain I could hardly bear, but beneath the sorrow was a profound gratitude. A gratitude for the life we had shared, for the love that had carried us through everything. In the weeks that followed, I found myself surrounded by the memories we had created together. Every corner of our home, every brushstroke in my paintings, every note in the music he had loved reminded me of him, of the love that had defined my life. I returned to the gallery, now a space filled with memories of him, and found solace in the community he had helped create. People came by, sharing their own stories of love and loss, offering me a sense of connection that softened the edges of my grief. In the years that followed, I continued to paint, to create, to live a life that honored the love we had shared. David had taught me that love, in its truest form, never dies. It lives on in the memories we create, in the lives we touch, in the legacy we leave behind. His presence remained with me, a gentle whisper, a quiet strength that carried me through each day. As I grew older, I often thought about the journey we had taken together, the love that had begun so quietly, the trust we had built, the life we had created side by side. I knew that our love would endure beyond this life, that it would continue in the hearts of those we had touched, in the stories we had shared, in the art that adorned our gallery walls. And as I sat in the garden we had once tended together, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, I knew that David was still with me, his love woven into every breath, every heartbeat, every quiet moment of peace. Our love had transcended time, had become something eternal, a legacy of resilience, joy, and unending devotion. In the end, I realized that our story was not just about love. It was about life, about the beauty of second chances, about the strength that comes from vulnerability, and about the quiet, profound joy of finding a partner who walks beside you through every twist and turn. And as I took my final breath, I knew that our spirits would find each other again, bound by a love that had carried us through this life and would carry us into the next.